Monday, August 13th, 2018, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So the world's currencies are continuing to suffer a lot. Of course, the dollar is the reserve currency for now, and that's what all the other currencies are going down against. Also against gold, as I spoke in my video on Saturday. I noted how gold has done very well against the euro, sterling, the Turkish lira, of course, and other fiat currencies. Eventually, the dollar will also implode against gold and silver, which are real money. And it's interesting that this is all happening now very near the 47th anniversary of when President Nixon closed the gold window temporarily. So it's still a temporary measure after 47 years. Well, I guess the income tax after the Napoleonic Wars in the UK was also supposed to be a temporary measure to raise funds to pay for that war. But over 200 years after, we still have the income tax. So what's happening overnight? Are the currencies still going down? Is it spilling over into Europe? Is it spilling over into the US? After all, on Friday, the Dow dropped almost 200 points, about 0.75%. S&P dropped 20. The NASDAQ dropped 50, right? Late Sunday or yesterday, the Turkish lira opened and it went up above 726. So these are all quoted, the Turkish lira, they're all and the South African rand, which also has had a rough day today. It's quoted in terms of how many dollars or how many of the units of these currencies you can get for $1. So right now the Turkish lira is 688. That's the dollar is up another 7.5%, so you can get 688 Turkish lira. It was as much as 726 earlier today or overnight. The South African rand dropped as much as 10%, but right now it's only down 2.7%. The dollar right now is 14.44 versus the South African rand. South Africa, of course, is one of the BRICS nations, but this morning the dollar bought as much as 15.67. So we've had quite a spike as well, higher in the dollar and a fairly big drop. European currencies are down still. Euro, I spoke about that head and shoulder. That was on Saturday. Doesn't look good, the euro. The pound, we know, even before the euro broke down, the pound was looking pretty bad as well. So let's have a look at what we're doing and talk a little bit about more what I think. So gold, unfortunately, this morning, it's down as well, which doesn't make sense, but that's what the central bankers do. It's 8:36 a.m. London. You can bet they're out. They're there already. I think they saw, for example, that they weren't comfortable with what gold did in Europe in terms of the euro and sterling, and they're kind of trying to get people away from gold because they want people to stay in the system. In a system where if you put your money in the bank, it's an unsecured loan. So do you really want, if you are able, fortunately, to save some wealth, you really want to keep it in a corrupt bank? And they're corrupt anywhere. There's no bank that saves itself, not even credit unions, because they have to have accounts with the corrupt banks. Do you really want to put all your money there and be at the mercy of the banksters who work with the central banks and the governments? I don't think so. So I would say hold on. If you don't need the money to spend or to any emergency, hold on to your physical silver. I've got a few. This is ear of the pig, I think, $2. I think it's 2 ounces of silver from the Australian Mint. I've got here a maple leaf, 1 ounce. I've got like a panda 1 ounce panda as well. And then I have some paper currencies. That's what it used to be. And it is valuable because it used to be a silver certificate, right? Of course, you can't go to the U.S. Treasury anymore and ask for the $1 in silver. That's been completely destroyed, that relationship. This one here was from, let's see, I think it was 1928, I'm not sure. And there's this one here from a little later, another silver certificate. Of course, these are worth something as collectors, but if you go to the bank now, they're not. So the paper doesn't last, let alone the fiat paper. I don't have any current Federal Reserve notes here in the UK, but you get the gist. So yeah, gold is down 7 this morning. Is at 1204.34. The low's been 1203.55, and I can tell you that it's just been in the last half hour that we've gone from like around 1208. So we've made a new low, unfortunately, here. But silver is down as well, but down the same amount in percentage as gold. So it was outperforming gold earlier, but now it's catching up. It's at 1520. I'm not concerned about it. In pounds, gold, it's still at 946. So still up from a week ago when it was at 932. So the stock markets are continuing to move lower. The Dow future right now is down 100 points, 25,217. It has been down over 100 points, so it's down about 0.4%. S&P 500 is down 0.3, and NASDAQ is down 1/3%. So we've also got the European currencies are continuing to melt down, not as quickly, of course, as the emerging market ones, but I think it's going to spill over. Could it be that the Economist magazine from 1988 was right? We'll have to see. So the pound right now is down another 1/4%. It's at 127.36, right near the lows of 127.31. So we continue to drop in terms of the dollar for the pound. Euro as well, looking really bad. There's all the talk, of course, that there's a lot of exposure. A lot of European banks have exposure to the corporate sector in Turkey. So the euro this morning is at 113.70. I remember a week or so ago talking about how the euro is at 117. So that's moving quickly as well, down 1/3%. And it's funny though, because the dollar today is dropping quite a bit against the yen. And that's why I think there is some manipulation of the gold price today. Because usually when the dollar drops a lot against the yen, gold does well. And the dollar's losing 2/3% today, which is a big move against the yen. We're at 110.23, down 70 pips. What about the stock markets in Europe? Well, let's have a look here. The DAX right now is only down 66, the German DAX, down 0.5%. I can tell you though, I've looked at the European stock indices, the charts, and they look pretty toppy to me, forming kind of head and shoulders. The FTSE is only down 40 right now. We're 0.5%. The CAC in France is only down 0.2%. Italy is down 0.7, down 150 points. So still fairly controlled, the drop at the moment. What about the Chinese yuan? Let's have a look. Chinese yuan, the dollar is up 1/4% against the Chinese yuan. Crude oil is 66.85, down 1/3%. And the other thing I wanted to note is that the Italian 10-year yield is actually spiking back up above 3%. It's up 7 basis points at 307. The US 10-year is actually dropped a little bit since Friday and Thursday. It's now around 286%. People still looking at that as a safe haven, believe it or not. So, what are the headlines this morning? Well, let's have a look. I like to look at zero hedge. I know you can look at other stuff as well, sometimes the FT, to see what the mainstream is talking about. So let's have a look here. Turkish state media exposes the American empire and its media. It looks like a bit like Donald Trump. Turkey is exposing the mainstream media. Turkish lira crashes through $7. Crashes through 7 as Erdogan threatens to unleash Plan B or C. About FT, Turkish lira drops further as investors await action plan. Central bank takes steps to support financial system as currency crisis escalate. So it's getting interesting. I was speaking earlier about the 47th anniversary of Nixon closing the gold window. Yeah, it's on August 15th, so on Wednesday. I think back in 1971, that was on a Sunday when he announced that, when the markets were closed. I read an article yesterday in Silver Doctors. Someone wrote about, the 2018 date, which is the 30th anniversary of the Economist magazine. They're trying to guess at what date we would have what this guy called the Great Reset. He mentioned August 15th because it would be the 47th anniversary of that event, of Nixon shock, so to speak. And he spoke of November 11th, 2018, which would be the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, which ended at the 11th hour on the 11th day on the 11th month. And he talks about how the powers that be, the Freemason crowd, how they like the number 11, 9/11, 11/11/11, and he mentions that this year, the 11th of November, 11/11, and then if you add up the numbers in 2018, you get another 11. So he thinks we could have something happen 15th of August. He talks about the 10th of October, which is 10/10/18, because that coin on the Phoenix in the Economist magazine has there's a number 10, and it's also written 10. So he thinks maybe 10th of October 2018, but or the 11th of November. I'm not sure it's going to happen on a day. Maybe it could, but there's definitely something going on here with the currencies. I know right now it's happening in the emerging markets. We've seen in the past these things happen in emerging markets and not spill over into the major markets of Europe or North America. So, but sometimes it does. Like in 1998, the Russian crisis, that did, and also the earlier in that year, the Asian currency crisis, that spilled over and brought down Jim Rickards' hedge fund that had to be bailed out by the Fed, LTCM. So, and I think a lot of Wall Street banks were under threat in 1998. So it is possible that it could spill over. And I would say Turkey, has, Europe has a lot of exposure, and that doesn't really exempt the U.S. Banking system, because the big U.S. banks are very exposed to the big European banks. So that's what we need to keep in mind. I wouldn't be concerned about gold and silver and the price action. I mean, I'd rather hold on to these things than have too much fiat money in the bank. I don't own that money in the bank. It's an unsecured loan, and there's always a chance of bail-in. I know there is insurance, FDIC in the US, there's insurance here in the UK, but you can bet if there's a systemic crisis, that insurance will be like useless, because those institutions that insure the deposits, they have a small fraction of the whole amount of deposits that there are. So they work well when there's a one small bank that fails. They can cover that, but when the whole system is under threat, it's no good. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. And if you like to help the channel keep alive my contrarian alternative message, there's some links below in the description where you can contribute to the channel, or you can buy some merchandise from the channel. Take care. Goodbye.